What's going on, everybody? So recently I've been presenting on speed training for the injured athlete. And in a lot of these presentations, we've been covering general treatment paradigms, but we have yet to get to a lot of the case study specific work. So I wanted to come out here on the field and basically give some of that presentation and be able to take you through 2 examples for the hip, 2 examples for the knee, and 2 examples for the ankle of some potential likely injuries that you may encounter, and go over some general principles to help you understand how to continue speed training when working with an injured athlete. So let's start with hamstring, something that I've talked a lot about with the hamstring. And we're going to get into this today. We're going to start with linear mechanics. So when you get a hamstring injury, you really don't want to rest for very long. In the first 24 to 48 hours, we should already be getting out in the field and starting to at least march. It's important that you continue practicing, working on some of these positions early. We find that those who do get exposed early to load tend to return much quicker, and that delaying your rehab, every 1 day of delay is probably about 3 days of return to play on the back end. So it's important to get to work. So first thing, now in hamstring, I'm going to have a problem with extending out or projecting horizontally very fast. But that does not mean that I can't move up and down really well. So early on, just some easy pogo or some easy plyometric type things that you can start. We may go with just a double foot pogo, okay, these leaps, these little double foot leaps, and you could even get pretty hard, okay? So we start with something here that's more rhythmic, more of that light tier, easy stuff, extensive work, progressing to a little bit more of that 70-80% type work, and then eventually we're trying to get into a little bit more intense. Now in general with plyometrics, starting with 2 feet is going to be the easiest. 2 feet that are even in a leap, easiest. Then we go to something that's a little bit more staggered stance. Okay, this is going to start becoming a little bit more challenging. And then we go from a staggered stance into a exchange, the split stance exchange. Then we can go to a bound where I'm just going from one foot to the other. And lastly, a hop, which is all on one leg. Now again, with hamstring related injuries, you can do a lot of vertically oriented drills. And so when we look at plyometrics and we're keeping things more vertically oriented, well, okay, now we can do the same with running mechanics. So maybe early on, all they can tolerate is a march. And maybe that height of the leg needs to be a little lower, but we can still start reciprocating that gait. We can still get into some of those patterns, helping them understand that when I bend my knee as I lift the thigh, I'm getting slack on that hamstring. So if you already have an athlete who likes to reach out with the foot and open that knee angle when they do their marching or their skipping, sometimes having a hamstring injury and feeling that constraint can help clean up some of the mechanics anyway. So it's good to keep practicing these. Now when we talk about other linear type drills with a hamstring injury that you can start doing, we've got dribble drills. We've talked about this before, or I have, and you've probably seen a lot of these dribble type drills being explained. All you're trying to do is constrain the size of your wheel or the size of your gait, the size of your stride, and progressively build that up over time. The common ones are over the ankle, over the mid calf, and over the knee, where I'm just thinking about stepping my medial malleolus or my little ankle bones here over each of those points. So I'm just stepping over the ankle, I'm stepping over about the mid calf, or I'm stepping over the knee. And if we're doing this, you're just introducing these. Maybe the first type of things that you're going to do is you're just getting it to move in place. Now you can see as I'm doing this in place, I'm very toey. With the dribble drills, we're trying to get people to get to the midfoot. So instead of it being this really toey type movement, we want to get to the point where it's more here on contact. So a couple of ways you can do this. You can start by just walking heel to toe, so they understand that I'm trying to almost lead with the heel as I meet the ground. And then you can start going in place and trying to get to that midfoot. And then all I'm doing from here is I'm starting to move forward. Every time I contact the ground, I'm looking for just a small little push into the ground, that I'm meeting the ground with some negative foot strike velocity that's going to help me project forward. It doesn't need to be hard. In fact, early on, very little, and I'm just trying to get that bounce. But again, these dribble drills are a great place to start. So I may start with ankling. If that's going well and we've done potentially 50 to 100 yards worth of ankling over the ankle, or dribble drills over the ankle, then we're going to go to the mid calf and see if they can build up the size a little bit there. If that's still going well and deeper into the process of the rehab, then we can start going a little bit more over the knee. Again, moving more up and down in this position versus trying to project out with that is going to go well. You also, in this position, you can do lots of skipping, lots of vertically oriented bounds. It's important to talk about this because with hamstring as well as other related injuries, we can't just have a velocity-based approach, meaning I can't just start running slowly and progressively run a little bit faster throughout rehab, because jogging or running slow is a very different thing than putting force into the ground when it comes to the foot and ankle and its interaction with the ground. So in order to maintain some of these elastic qualities, some of this rhythmic timing as well as punching into the ground, I can't just start jogging and expect that I'm going to have those elastic qualities with the foot and ankle mechanics down the road. So we're trying to preserve as many qualities as possible while we're waiting on the one tiny variable thing, in this case a hamstring, to catch up with the rest. But I should be the fittest I've ever been, right? All my other numbers in the weight room should be going up. I should be able to maintain a really high amount of extensive work when it comes to plyometrics, even intensive work when it comes to vertical plyometrics. This is a great time to really retrain and not get untrained while working through the rehab process. And so we talk about this kind of stuff. We talk about the dribbles because it's going to clean up mechanics. We talk about vertical stuff because they're going to maintain that foot and ankle interaction with the ground. Another easy thing though, as I get running, if I want an athlete to start running to 5 or to 10 yards, which is a great place to start, it's very nerve-wracking when you've dealt with a hamstring injury to come to the line and take off because you don't know how that hamstring is going to tolerate that first step. And a lot of times it feels too abrupt and the athlete may down throttle way more than you want them to. And so if we're already doing some vertical oriented drills, really easy thing to do is just start with a high knee, maybe 3 to 4 yards, maybe 5 yards off the line, have the athlete high knee in, and then just like one of those little Segway tour things, you're just slowly leaning in as you approach the line, and you're just going to maintain that kind of high knee mechanics, pistoning up and down, punching, the A switch type series that we talk about maybe here in a second, as I project down the line. So that might look something like I'm just here, I'm getting my high knees, as I approach the line, I lean, and I start moving forward. Okay, that way, instead of getting to the line and trying to project out, I know exactly how that's going to feel because I always have my finger on the pulse of how much I'm comfortable leaning because I'm already in that reciprocating gait pattern with the knees lifting and punching to the ground. Now, when we talk about the A switches, talked about some marching, talked about how you might introduce some plyometrics and how you might introduce people moving and locomoting forward, okay? But some other drills that you can work on. We have some Les Spellman drills, or the Altos group does some drills on the wall that I can show you here in a minute, which are really great. But another thing that we can do is the A switch drills. Now, a switch is I'm just trying to come from this top A position and switch rapidly into the alternate one. A lot of athletes, a lot of even healthy athletes are going to have a really hard time doing this if it's their first time. So you may have to limit the size of the shapes that they're making and just try to switch small. And then you're trying to build that switch to where I can get that knee up, that heel tucked under my hamstring, and switch, and I'm ending tall. I'm trying to keep my head and my hips tall. So you have a single switch, which I just demoed. You have a double switch, okay? You'll also have a 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3 triple switch, and then you can go continuous, and now we're doing continuous high knee into that falling start, that waterfall start into the run. So that's a really easy thing to do. Now I'm going to come over here, and with the wall drills, and I'm just going to show you on this post, but a couple of things that we're trying to do is get the athlete comfortable with and strong with the positions that we need to get into when looking to accelerate. So I might work into a wall and get into this 45-degree position. I don't want to let my ankles totally sag down to the ground where I'm just relaxing, but I also don't need to be up here on my toes. Find that sweet spot right there in the middle where there's pressure on the balls of the feet, where I feel strong through my calf and Achilles, and I feel like I can develop the most amount of pressure into the surface that I'm pushing on. Now, from this position, I'm trying to create mostly a straight line from head to heels. I'm trying to create that power line. And from this position, just teach the athlete to push really hard. Once they can do that, then I might have them walk their feet in a little bit, and we're going to lift. And instead of getting to that position where you're trying to lift so much that now I'm opening the foot angle or the knee angle, driving the foot forward, showing a lot of that shin to the wall, okay, and then crunching and trying to push and pull, you'll see the back knee start to bend, and the hips they're trying to get through, so they're trying to tuck it under them, and you'll see this thing happen here, which isn't very efficient or where we really want to learn to push from. We want to keep things long, that angle tall and long, be able to lift, keep that heel pulled up tight under the hamstring, and then separate the thighs, keeping that long, straight power line through that position. Once they can do that, and maybe we'll do something like 3 sets of 10 seconds, 3 sets of 15 seconds with the double leg, progress to the single leg, then we can start doing some load and lift type drills. It's going to be a little hard to balance on this post, but hopefully you get the idea. In acceleration, one of the key tenets that we want to see happen as someone moves forward off the line is that we want to see that that shin angle is not kicking back, that as I extend forward, the knee doesn't whip or travel back. So getting to triple extension off of the line, while it's talked about a lot, and I understand that people want to see these joints project well, if I just get to full knee lock, what happens a lot of times is athletes, when they go to come forward, will just bleed energy out of the back by trying to get to that knee extension. What we want to see happen is we want to see right off the line, those first few steps, that the knee is always traveling forward, that it's not traveling back, that the hip is on a line traveling forward. And so we have to delay knee extension, meaning that my hips are going to start extending before the knee has really started to extend. Otherwise, my hips are going to come up, that knee is going to travel back, and I'm going to bleed out of the backside and not project horizontally. So when we talk about load and lift, a couple of things that we want to do is we're going to get into a position where I can get to maybe a 60, 70, some athletes will be able to get up to a 90-degree knee bend here, and pinning that shin, lifting the other leg. From here, I'm trying to come forward and through and back into that power line position. It's a little tough when you have a wall. Sometimes this type of a drill is really nice if you have a prowler or a push sled pinned up against the wall so it can't move. That way my chest can come through. Even a barbell on a rack works really nice. You can do this free, or you can put a band around the waist for some additional load, which can be really nice. But I'm just going to show you here of how you might do this on a wall. Again, I'm going to get here. I'm going to load into that knee flexed position, and I'm going to come up and through, trying to find that power line through my body, even though I'm letting my arms bend because I have to move closer to the wall. And we're just moving through that, trying to keep the shin right where it's at and get used to moving forward and back with that delayed knee extension. And then from there, you can obviously start going into where I'm loading, lifting, switching, loading, lifting, switching, loading, lifting, switching, and then move into your more switch drills where I'm trying to basically attack the ground right where the other foot left off, hitting those same positions, creating that line through the head without getting rolled forward, compressed down, pushing on the thing. Stay open, keep that rhythm, that posture, and focus on slicing and scissoring the thighs without letting the knee angle open and showing more of that broad side of the shin to the wall. while still feeling all that pressure through your hips. So just some really easy type drills that you can start doing to work on extension, working on acceleration mechanics while still dealing with a hamstring injury. Now, a couple other things we talk about hamstring injuries before we wrap up and get to the next one is when we're looking at deceleration. Hamstring folks dealing with hamstring injury will have a hard time projecting forward, okay? And they're going to have a hard time as they get beyond 65, 70% of max velocity. We know that with hamstring tendencies or hamstring strains, even in a healthy hamstring, when it comes to load related to the velocity that you're moving, once you get beyond about 70 to 80% of velocity, we see exponential rise in the hamstring load, the hamstring eccentric load, and the total amount of force that the hamstrings have to experience. And so this is the difference of going, from like a 30 or 40% of your 1RM on a bench, and then all of a sudden you're asking for 80%. Those are very different numbers if you've been dealing with some kind of a shoulder or pec strain. It's the same with hamstring, that the faster you go, the more you try to project horizontally and those speeds increase, you're going to see an exponential rise. So what we can do is we can still decelerate. Now, what's really great, again, we talked about earlier that if I open my shin angle a lot in a march, it's going to pull on the hamstring, so it may clean up mechanics. In deceleration type drills, again, if I am folding forward at the waist as I decelerate, I'm going to get a lot of hamstring strain. And that's kind of the beauty of working on some of these mechanics while dealing with an injury like a hamstring strain, because now I don't want to get folded forward in my deceleration. I want to sit in the chair. That as I come down into my decel, I want to see that that chest is maintaining upright positions, that I'm not getting folded forward. And so again, if I fold forward and I feel the hamstring, I'm going to tend to sit back and sit down in the chair more, which is a great deceleration mechanic thing. So we can do a lot of linear decel type stuff. Maybe you start with something that's adding artificial velocity, so I don't have to create the velocity and project out. I get something that's giving me a horizontal force vector, that's giving me some speed without me having to generate it, but while still getting a powerful decel moment in these. So just starting here, maybe you're just doing one step forward and back, almost like a pendulum lunge type position. If that feels fine, then I can go 1, 2. Okay, come back, I can go 1, 2. And then you could progress, obviously, to now where you're going 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4, 5. Maybe you take this off, and now we're able to start going 5 yards, 10 yards into decels that way. Now, if I want to start, I may just come in and stick for a moment and come up just so they feel the position. I may even have this horizontal force vector and just start with some oscillations to make sure they understand where their body is in space, where I want them to be, and just develop some capacity here that they feel confident. Then the first step is a stick, and then we're looking to stick, bounce out. And then as we start adding more steps, now it's not just bounce out, but maybe it's bounce out and take another 1 to 2 steps going the other direction, where I'm coming in, 1, 2. I come in, 1, 2. Then you try to get out a little quicker, okay? So that's basically how we would progress some of the things. Now, if we go lateral, it's important, a couple of things, that when we look at change of direction, and I come into a lateral step, I don't necessarily want my foot to be facing perfectly straight down the line. I want to have a little bit of a toe turn out because I need a little bit of leverage in the frontal plane. So if I come here, it makes it very easy to roll over that outside of the ankle. Whereas if I just have a tiny bit of angle out, that's going to keep me from rolling over the ankle as easily. And I get a little bit more of a lever arm in the frontal plane to help me project and move side to side. Okay. But if an athlete is coming in and they're getting folded forward, again, every time they do this and trying to sink down into that hip, that's going to be really hard on that hamstring. And so getting them to turn out, having a little bit of a stiffer contact, being a little bit more upright, that's going to teach them where to be in space. And so again, just like with the linear decel, I may just start with a lateral lunge step, coming here and out. And it may be kind of shallow. You see, I'm not really getting all that deep, because if I get deep into that squat, that might be a little bit sensitive on the hamstring. But the good thing is, when you're not moving that fast, you can have more of a stiff contact. You can be a little higher. You don't need to sink quite as low. And then even here, if I wanted to see about where their range of motion was, I may have them set up in a position where I want them to cut from, and then we're just sinking in and we're just doing some little oscillations and getting comfortable getting in and getting out and speeding up and feeling that initial impulse of getting to that side and coming out before we then start adding a step and come out, or starting to shuffle. Now, that's a good point. When we talk about shuffling, I know we're going through a lot here. I'm trying to give you as many things as I can for the hamstring. We have a couple of modes of travel when it comes to change of direction type work. Okay, you have forwards and backwards, stopping linearly, backpedaling. You have shuffling, where I can shuffle backwards this way, okay? I have a crossover step as I may be needing to retreat, or as I'm coming down the field this way and opening up the other direction, there's a crossover step run. Or I have curvilinear type sprinting or running. With a hamstring injury, we know that there's going to be pretty significant deficits that if I've pulled my right hamstring, I'm not going to be able to turn left very well. We can call it the Derek Zoolander, the ambi-turners. They're going to turn pretty well going towards the affected side on the hamstring, but running in a curve away from the affected side is going to be a deficit, and that's also where sometimes you see injuries occur, is I'm taking contact on this side and I'm trying to bend, or I'm running at high speed velocity, trying to add a slight bend. That outside biceps femoris, as I come around that curve, is going to be under a lot more load than the inside one. So a couple of things that you might want to consider is that they're going to have a really hard time doing crossover steps to the side that injury has happened. That's something we want to expose them to as we get going, and something that you really want to make sure you're seeing as you get closer and closer to return to play, return to participation, or return to performance, is that you want to see that we can get to that crossover run type step or curvilinear type running. But early on, you might find that I'm going to have to do a lot of shuffling for my change of direction work, that staying in a shuffle is going to be tolerated a lot better. And then when we start getting into crossover steps, I may have to do short spaces where all I'm doing is one step over, where if I have them straddle the line, I'm just seeing how far can they get and reposition, and can they get back to where we started. So if it was my right hamstring, I might say, okay, let's go to a crossover step on the left side. So my unaffected leg is going to be crossing over. I'm going to hit my crossover step, and the goal is, can I simply get back to where I started on that right side? Can I get back to here at the same projection, the same push? Now, if that's challenging, or you want to slow things down a little bit, just going against some resistance can be a really good way to build that strength and also regress the velocity that they're going to get going out. So again, if my right hamstring has been pulled and I'm starting to work on these crossover steps, instead of getting pulled in where my velocity may be high, I may just work on getting pushed out so that this leg, once this leg comes off the ground, this is the driver, but I'm also limiting the velocity of how much I can get out, and then they can slowly grade into it. Then, if I were to flip and face the other direction, let's pretend now that this is my injured hamstring, then coming in, now I have to be able to reach cross fast. This leg, my right leg, is no longer the one that's being the main driver of the pusher. It's this leg that, as this band is resisting me in, that has to get to that position, load, reposition to that penultimate, and then come down to that final foot contact. So that's how we would progress, is I'm going to push out from my right hamstring so that this leg is the primary driver, and I'm just getting used to that leg coming across my body. And then we'd progress to coming in. I'll flip this way so you can see. So if this leg was my hurt leg, now it's the one that has to take the load as I come in. Now, with that, you can also do some lead to after related drills where a big purpose, or not purpose, but a big thing that you have to do well in, especially defensive players, and this happens even in dodging or offensive related players, is that you have to get good at dissociating your hips from what your trunk is doing, that these two pieces want to do separate things. So you can do things, whether with a med ball, I like using a strap as well, to help cue the athlete that your shoulders are going to stay facing there. And I'm just here trying to flip, and this band is keeping my arms and shoulders, my trunk facing this way, and foot back. Flip, 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 flip. And I'm just getting used to that rotation. Now, obviously, you can start adding some layers where maybe I flip and push, okay? Flip and push, where I'm just shuffling. You can start adding crossover. You can start layering on pieces and parts, but just understanding that getting to that part where my hips and trunk are doing different things is important for any kind of change of direction work, and something that you can do a lot of when working with hamstring injuries. Perhaps last would be understanding that in change of direction and in hamstring related injuries, we want to get as much of the whole foot to the ground as possible. That when I change direction, I don't want to come up here on my toe and try to be making changes of direction on my toes. I need to get more of that whole foot into the ground. It's the idea that you can't shoot a cannon out of a canoe. I have a very small surface area, and I'm trying to ask a lot of force to go through that. Okay, you want a battleship. Put that whole foot into the ground so you can be powerful moving. The same thing that you're going to see moving forward in hamstring injuries is it's going to look like they're running on hot coal. They do not want to get that whole foot closer to the ground, so we do those dribble drills, because that's going to ask a lot more of the hip and hamstring. You're going to want to see, or you're going to start see them wanting to be very toey, because if I stay toey, I can just sort of prance along, and I don't really have to get into my hips as much. I can stay very knee and calf and offload it. But that's not a very effective running mechanic. That's not what we want to promote or teach. And you'll see that once an athlete starts getting fast, maybe on one side, you're going to see that strong push, and then the other side, you're going to see a very toey touchdown. And I call it the hot coal run, that they're running on hot coals. So some easy drills to maybe get them used to that, along with the dribble drill, is almost like a prancing pogo, where both feet contact, and then I'm trying to get to that hip extension as I come through. So it might be looking something like that, where you can see I'm getting to that power line position that we got on the wall, of that foot is neutral with the ankle, the hip is extended, and I'm pushing through as much of the ball of the foot and the whole foot as possible as I project down the track. And I have to get to that extension versus staying really toey. You'll be able to coach them, film them, and see that. So now, when it comes to anything else in terms of spacing, again, hamstring related injuries are going to be really difficult as you start getting further out and they're able to gain velocity. Early on in hamstring rehab, they're going to do very good in short spaces, especially when you start adding complexity or adding number of changes of direction, where they're having to stay in the chair to do things, and I can't really get outside my frame very far. I'm also not able to accelerate. So just understand, as we start introducing them into drills with their team, as we start doing mini games, we start doing more change of direction, we want to get more field exposures. In addition to working on linear mechanics and the gait and restoring that, you can do a lot to improve their footwork game, to improve how they react, how they move, how they orient their body, their head, their hips in short spaces, by adding things like maybe a triangle or a square with cones, and having them either shuffle, backpedal, diagonal run around the cone, run to it, and then switch, where instead of running around the cone, I may be running to the cone, planting, coming across like that crossover run. Again, as long as you're keeping those spaces relatively small, where they can only take maybe 1 or 2 steps in either direction to start off, and then slowly increasing the size of the sandbox they can play in, those are really, really valuable ways to start working on a lot of great field type mechanics when you're working with a hamstring injury. So I've talked about a lot, and there's probably even more to talk about here, but I wanted to help you understand with just hamstrings that that is a very easy starting point of some basic drills that you can start doing. Welcome to the classroom, guys. I hope this really helped you.